Hi, everybody. This is Mandy Now, the Executive Director of Health Professions Week, and I want to say thank you for joining us for our next Health Talk today. I am so excited to introduce to you our next guest speaker, a friend of HPW's and a friend of mine, Petros Manassi, Senior Director, Pre-Health Programs at Kaplan. Welcome back to HPW. I feel like we get to do this every year together.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy, and I'm happy to be back, and I'm happy that we get to do this every year, and hopefully we'll have another great conversation.
I have no doubt that we will. We always seem to come up with an amazing topic. And I think the one that we're going to tackle today really speaks to a subset of our population, maybe the students that are already in college, they're already starting to make their way to their intended profession. And our partners, our profession partners at Health Professions Week are always talking about the skill sets that they're looking for when they're helping students find the right path to a health profession. From pharmacy to optometry or any of our physician disciplines, there's a certain set of characteristics and skills that we want students to have. Interestingly enough, as we start to talk about Kaplan, nobody ever says, I always ask my doctor what their MCAT score was before our appointment. So, Petros, walk us through, why are admissions tests so important for students?
I think that's, nobody posts their MCAT score, their DAT score on their, office door. But I think really it's the fact that they are in the office and wearing the white coat. And part of what's gotten them there has been obviously a lifetime commitment up until and continuing through as a working professional, a lifetime commitment to learning. But with the admissions exams specifically, what the admissions exams do, which oftentimes is overlooked, and I've been doing this for a very long time, I've been a teacher, obviously, been part of Health Professions Week in this capacity. So I say this really with kind of that notion of how we want to put our mindset in terms of these exams. And what these exams do is they test students on a set of skills which are really different from what undergraduate science classes are testing you on, right? So when you're taking physics, you're taking chemistry, you're being tested on if you understand the physics or you understand the chemistry. And of course, there is a level of critical thinking and reasoning that is tested in those classes. You get to the admissions exams, and they're really testing you on those sciences coupled with the critical thinking and the reasoning.
Putting it all together.
It comes all together. And oddly enough, can you do that work and complete that reasoning in the amount of time that is being given to you? I mean, I know that sounds real basic, but yes, these are timed exams for a reason, because at the end of the day, if you're a patient and you're in the ER, do you want the doctor who is going to take 2 or 3 hours to figure out what's going wrong or to go through the deductive reasoning process, the analysis process, or do you want the doctor who's going to look and be like, okay, in 4 or 5 minutes, I have figured out what we need to do and we're taking action and we're fixing you, right? So it's all the things that really come together. And, with these admissions exams, they're used as part of the admissions process. And I think that's always important. I know this is kind of related and unrelated to the question you just asked, but we have to think about these in the context of the admissions process as a whole. It is one component. Yes, it's an important component. It is the standardized component. It's the one component that everybody is being measured against the same metric, but it is complementary to all the other things that an admissions team, an admissions committee is going to be looking at. So I always tell students, you want to do your best on these exams. It's not the end of the world if you don't get the perfect score. In fact, most people don't get a perfect score on these exams, but it's going to tell another part of your story in the admissions process, and really in the process of your lifelong learning for wanting to be in the profession that you want to be in. Because, I know we're getting a little ahead of ourselves here, but this isn't the last test you're going to take. This is the test you take to get in. And there's a test you got to take.
Exactly right.
Depending on the profession you go into, there's going to be a multiple series of exams
every couple of years.
Yep. Every couple of years. And then once you're done, you're going to go through continuing education every couple of years and be evaluated. So this really isn't the end, right? In any way, this is the beginning of the beginning in many ways. And it's important, I think, to kind of realize that early on, that this isn't a one and done, that the skills that you acquire here, you're going to be able to acquire or use the next time. And then you're going to acquire even more skills, and you're going to keep building on it as you go forward.
Right, absolutely. Those admissions exams are the warm-up exams for our lifelong learners. So, we've got students, that are going to be listening in, and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm 18, I'm 19, I have so many exams coming down the pike. How do I get started now to make sure that I am successful for, setting up, a great MCAT or a DAT, and then going on and doing, other exams along the way?
I think the advice that I would give to any student, and especially a student who is earlier in their academic career, is to, obviously you have the immediate task at hand, right? There's the midterm that's coming up. There's the lab that's due. There's the problem set that's due, whatever it might be. That's the immediate task that is at hand. And, hindsight's always 20/20, but most students, their goal is to ace that exam or ace that lab or ace that problem set, which is fine and should continue to be what a student is putting focus on. But what we lose sight of is the longer term picture, right? How one concept feeds into the next concept. How, when we learn something, how we'll be able to apply it maybe to a situation that is completely different from how we have been tested on it before, how we've been trained on it. And the example that always comes to mind for me, and I say this too, so if folks have heard me talk about this before, I apologize because I always use this example, but something like oxidation reduction is taught in general chemistry. Okay. It is also taught in organic chemistry. It's also taught in biology, and it's also taught in a physics class. And those are the four kind of core pre-health science courses that a student is more than likely to take. And what happens is students will think that it's different. They say, oh, this is redox, but they're thinking about it from a physics perspective or from a bio perspective. It's all the same thing. It's all electrons moving, right, is what it is.
Right.
It just happens to be electrons moving in a biological system if you're looking at it from a biochemical pathway. It's electrons moving from one metal to another if you're looking at it from a chemical pathway. But it's the same concept. And so really starting to think about the bigger picture, and more importantly, how one scientific concept that maybe historically is taught in one subject area, how that actually can apply somewhere else. And we hear this a lot from pre-meds, from pre-dent students, specifically with physics. So pre-dents or dental students actually don't have to, there's no physics on the DAT, luckily enough, but you still oftentimes take physics, right? There's physics is part of our lives, whether we take it in high school or not, or high school or in college. We think about where we hear terms like torque, and we think, okay, a physics professor is teaching me about torque, but then you think about it in the human body, and well, there's torque all over the place, right? There's work that's going to happen, and you're either lifting your arm or you're biting down with your teeth, right? And one tooth is hitting the other one, and that's creating, so it's all connected is really what it comes down to. So I think early on for students, the better they are able to have that kind of mindset of this is going to come back, and how can I be using this? That way, let's say you take chemistry in your first year, and then you take one of these exams in your junior year, you're not spending time relearning stuff that you've actually really should have been using all this time and thinking about all this time as you were kind of going through. So
yeah, Absolutely. Excellent advice, as always. Okay, so the big question here is, what skills outside of the sciences? So the sciences are really super important, but there's so many other things that go into being a lifelong learner, an excellent physician, an excellent dentist. What else should these pre-health students be focused on?
I think it really comes down to, so this concept of lifelong learning is something, I think that's actually a skill in and of itself that needs to be embraced very early on. And you know, the way I think about it is, I mean, very selfishly, and I think we all think about this, if we are calling upon the services of a healthcare provider, we want that healthcare provider to have the most up-to-date information. We want them to be, you know, read up on the latest literature.
Scientifically curious, yes.
Yeah, we want them to be scientifically curious. Exactly. That's exactly it. We want them to be a person who is always learning. We don't want the doctor who went to medical school 30 years ago and is still practicing the same medicine, even though new medications or new treatments have come about, right? We don't want that doctor, because that doctor is probably not going to help us as best as they can. I mean, the fascinating thing about the healthcare, I mean, all the sciences, everything that goes into healthcare is, and really we've seen this even in the last 10, 15 years, obviously the last 2 or 3 years, even more so, rapidly evolving, right? I mean, the technology and the tools available to a physician today are exponentially greater than those that were available just 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And then you look back 100 years ago. I mean, there was, not that long ago, there was a practice of, and I use this all the time as a very extreme example. There was a practice of bloodletting, right? Like you got sick with a cold, oh, we're going to just bleed you a little bit. Like let's take half a pint of your blood, and that's going to make you stronger, make you feel better. I mean, thank goodness we don't do that anymore, right? That's not the...
We have evolved away from that, yes.
Right, yeah, we've evolved away from that, thankfully, and let's not evolve back to it. So this idea really of the scientific curiosity, but also in terms of specific skills, as far as the sciences and as far as these exams and really just lifelong learning in general, is a continual analysis of our own ability to critically reason and to critically analyze things. And the reason why I say we have to analyze ourselves in terms of our ability to analyze other things is that it is an evolving process that we have to practice in order to refine. So you think about kind of how all the knowledge works. The knowledge that a physician possesses is only valuable to a patient if the physician is able to apply that knowledge to the patient, right? It's not good enough to just say, I know a lot of things. You need to know a lot of things and know when it is appropriate to apply which things and which course of action to your patient and to the person that you're serving. And so you think about even these exams mimic this. And of course, the healthcare professional programs mimic this. You are taking content, knowledge, and you are taking information from the patient, right? Maybe you have a broken tooth. Well, I know how to fix a broken tooth, but I now need to look at the tooth that the patient has, right, and figure out what's the best course of action for this specific person, right? I know how to treat a sore throat, but I need to see what kind of sore throat this patient has. Is it presenting as a viral infection? Is it presenting as a bacterial infection? Right? It's not good enough to say, oh, you have a sore throat, I'm giving you antibiotics, because maybe that's not actually going to help. So, and these are very simple examples of, I mean, they're far
very complex
ones. I mean, they're, right? This is a very kind of straightforward example of these. So the ability for a practicing healthcare professional to take the information they have, take the information they're getting from their patient, and put the two together to reason out the course of action, the diagnosis, the prescription, whatever it may be, right? What are we going to be doing next to correct the problem or to prevent the problem from happening. We don't always talk about it in terms of corrections. How do we prevent something from happening in the future? That is a skill that is going to carry forward literally for the rest of your professional lives. Right. That skill, coincidentally, is actually the core skill that is tested on these admissions exams, right? So this is, we don't realize that's what's happening. But when I go around saying you need to know content and you need to practice your critical thinking skills, really what I'm saying is you need to know content, you need to practice your critical thinking skills and put the two together to be able to reason out answer choices for these tests, which are like the diagnoses that you'll be reasoning out moving forward. And so the earlier that we can, quite frankly, accept the fact
and
that that's going to be part of our lives, the earlier we can be kind of constantly practicing that. And you can practice that even outside the sciences. I mean, there's all these exams have some kind of, I won't say reading comprehension, but a critical thinking section that doesn't require any prior knowledge. Right. I mean, with those, you literally need to be able to extract information from just what's in front of you. And you can do that by, reading newspapers. You can do that by kind of observing what's around you, right? Like those are skills that are very, very trainable. There's no such thing as, we hear this a lot from students, I'm not a good test taker. Like, okay, it doesn't mean you can't become a good test taker. It just means you haven't practiced the skills, or no one's told you what those skills are that you need to be practicing and identify, for yourself. And so really it's that ability to analyze yourself, analyze what your needs are, and then practice with it. And I think that's, really, it's going to carry forward for many, many years to come. Because I say this to students all the time, the MCAT, as an example, that is the test, the admissions exam to get into medical school. And there's the USMLE, which is one of the licensing exams for medicine. Those are prescribed tests. But every single patient that you encounter is actually a test.
Its own mini test.
Its own mini test every single time. So, if a doctor's spending 15 minutes with each patient, 8-hour day, that's 32 patients they're going to see. They're going to take 32 mini tests.
32 little mini tests.
And when you're practicing healthcare professional, you want to be scoring 100% on those tests, because now it's not a piece of paper or a computer screen. It's a person, right? It's literally someone, someone's life or someone's well-being is in your hands. And so the earlier you can adopt that and kind of incorporate that into your mindset, the better you're going to be, and the better off your patient's going to be in the long run.
That's right. You'll be able to see the marathon ahead of you and say, I may not have the skills today, but I can learn the skills and I can develop the skills. And Petros, tell students where they can go on your website to start working on some of these skills. So where can students get started to learn more?
We have a ton of information. If I were to try to list off all the websites, we could be here for another 15 minutes. So I'm just going to tell, so the place to start is kaptest.com. So straightforward.
We'll include that in the description so that people can click.
So that's the place to start. And then from there, you can select which profession you're thinking of going into. And then on each of those pages, you will find information about our programs, but more specifically, you'll find all the free resources that we have. So that's the place to start. Start with the free resources. We've got practice tests. We've got practice questions. We've got if you go to kaptest.com/study, so we'll also put that in the description. We have articles that are, from anywhere from how to choose your test date, how to choose your major, how to, study for this subject area, what's a good study plan. We've got lots and lots of information that's on there. We've got a great team of people who write these articles, edit these articles. We're always updating them. We're putting in new relevant information that's there. So that's the place to start. Is my advice to you. And quite frankly, we've got stuff for folks who are very early on. We've got stuff for folks in there who are later on in their undergraduate careers and such. So we even have something great article about how to pick your major, right? So things to consider when picking your major, because So oftentimes pre-health students think, oh, I got to be a bio major. No, you don't have to.
Right. No, you certainly don't have to. That's right. Excellent. Excellent. Petros, as always, this has been such an informative conversation. Thank you so much for bringing these tools and these resources to our students this year. It's been really fun chatting with you, and I appreciate the time. So, hey, we'll have to start thinking about a great conversation to have next year, too.
That's right. That's right.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Petros. You take care.
You too.